Я думаю, що у всіх різні інтереси. Причому у всіх у Заходу є ті, хто хоче, щоб ця війна йшла довго. Тому що це буде виснаження Росії, але ціною України, ціною життя людей.
Time is ticking for Ukraine. In the hottest sector of the front, in Ukraine's east, Russia continues to see success. On the 17th of September, Reuters reported that Russian forces captured the key Ukrainian town of Kursk. And raised their flag on a mine ventilation shaft on the outskirts of the town. This advance brings Russia to within a mere 5 kilometers of closing what is described as a cauldron south of Pokrovsk. This is the most perilous situation for Ukraine on the entire front line, and the one which a Ukrainian military analyst of the group Information Resistance named Konstantin Mashevets calls a threatening situation and believes that it can grow catastrophic. Who is to blame for this upcoming debacle? Is it President Zelensky and his decision to divert key Ukrainian troops to a Kursk invasion, which, as will be seen later in this video, was actually objected to by the former Commander-in-Chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, General Valery Zaluzhny, as well as another Ukrainian commander? Or is it perhaps the United States of America for their inability to provide enough armor, equipment and ammunition to Ukraine due to their admittedly dwindling stockpiles? And perhaps more importantly, why is the West revealing these deficiencies in published articles? Are they in fact prefacing the end of the Ukraine war? So today I will cover the updated situation in Pokrovsk, which is rapidly deteriorating for the Ukrainian armed forces. But I will also take a broader look at this war and discuss several Western media articles, which clearly indicate an inability for the Ukrainian armed forces to sustain a defense across several different fronts against the advancing Russians. And all the while this is happening, US commanders are now admitting that the Russian army is getting bigger and stronger. For instance, in recent months, the United States has reduced the amount of military assistance to Ukraine due to a reduction in its own stockpiles. This was reported by the CNN on the 17th of September. In April, the Pentagon announced a $1 billion military aid package to Kiev, but since then, none of the packages have exceeded the amount of $400 million, and in fact, some were less in the region of $125 and $250 million respectively. According to American officials, Joe Biden's administration has $6 billion to arm Ukraine, but after 2 years of attrition, the Pentagon does not have enough supplies. In quotations, we are talking about the stocks we have, what the Ukrainians are asking for, and whether we can satisfy these requests with what we currently have. Replenishment of stocks is also a problem, said one of the interlocutors to the TV channel. But as stocks dwindle for Ukraine's biggest backer, in Russia, Vladimir Putin issued a decree to increase the size of the Russian army, which will now number 2.389 million people. Of these, there will be 1.5 million military personnel, which means an increase in the number of Russian soldiers by 180,000. These two factors, that is, the decreasing stockpiles for the US and the enlargement of the Russian army, no doubt paint a gloomy picture for Ukraine's prospects to sustain the fight against Russia in the medium to long term. But the bad news for Zelensky doesn't end there. Politico recently came out with an alarming article stating that Ukraine's former commander-in-chief, General Zaluzhny, had initially opposed the Kursk operation when Zelensky first presented the idea to him in early 2024 and insisted on the plan. The reason for his opposition was that General Zaluzhny believed that the operation, and I quote, did not have a second step after the successful breakthrough of the border by Ukrainian units. According to Politico, General Zaluzny never received a clear answer from Zelensky and felt that it would be a mere adventure. So these are the stories I am going to cover in today's video. But before I do, I want to give a sincere thank you to all my subscribers and viewers, particularly those who have been with me since the start of this channel just over a year ago, and without who I would not have been able to be recently monetized. And if you ever wish to support my research and work outside of your views and likes on this channel, I have enabled a super chat so you can make donations through that medium. So with that, let's get into today's video. Let's begin with the Donetsk front. But since August that the situation in the Novelski salient began to deteriorate for the Ukrainians when Russian troops in the Ukrainian defense near Pokrovsk and Selidove suddenly turned south and rapidly moved toward the city of Kursk and began cutting off the Ukrainian garrison located to the east between Novelski, Gornyak, and Krasnohorivka. In an attempt to close this cauldron, the Russian army is simultaneously advancing from the north and the southeast, and as of the 16th of September, BBC Russian service reported that the length of the thorn of this protrusion is a mere 5 kilometers left. Telegram channels report that more than 1,000 soldiers of the Ukrainian armed forces may be trapped in this cauldron. Russian military telegram channels have already reported several times that Ukraine withdrew its garrison to avoid encirclement. But according to the BBC Russia, this obviously never happened. According to Konstantin Mashovets, a Ukrainian military analyst, the Russian army from the south side of this ledge advanced in the directions from Krasnohorivka to the villages of Ostroye and Alexandropol. In the north of the ledge, the armed forces of the Russian Federation have already occupied the village of Haletsinivka and are fighting for Ukrainsk. However, Reuters confirmed the capture of Ukrainsk on September 17th, as claimed by a pro-Russian military blogger to Reuters, adding that Russia took the city almost intact, allowing them to use it as a base for further operations. Ukrainian General Staff, however, has not confirmed this. On the 14th of September, the Russian Defense Ministry announced that it had captured the village of Zelane Pershi. The loss of the settlement will mean that almost all the main supply routes of the Ukrainian group at Novelski were under the control of the Russians, reports the BBC. Right now, it is only possible to get out of the cauldron by field and dirt roads while crossing the Vovcha River. Mashovets notes that if the enemy continues to advance in this direction, it may well become catastrophic for the entire flank of our group, which operates southeast of Pokrovsk. And this is where it becomes quite obvious to me that the dwindling stockpiles of the US armaments are having a deleterious effect on Ukrainian positions on the front line in east of Ukraine. As noted by Mr. Mashovets, there is an inequality of forces in this section of the front. According to him, the Novelski bridgehead from the Ukrainian side is held by only a few incomplete battalions. In opposition, they face a well-supplied army corps of the Russian Federation comprising about 15 to 30,000 fighters. Despite the increased activity in this cauldron south of Pokrovsk, the Ukrainian command says that Russia has not abandoned plans to attack Pokrovsk and rather is merely strengthening its flanks. Major Sergei Sukhotsky from the 59th Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine told the BBC correspondent that, and I quote, "The Russians are trying to strengthen the flanks to get closer to Pokrovsk, take it into semi-encirclement, and then start washing the city to the ground. Thus, the Russians are seeking to advance on Pokrovsk from the flanks, and according to Lieutenant Demianenko, who commands the 110th Brigade, the Russians right now are concentrated mainly on the southern flank and attack in small groups, often without armored vehicles. Their strategy is that they send 2 or 3 people who are trying to get to a certain point on the field. Then the others also try to get to this point, and when they gather 10 to 15 people there, that is when they try to attack. The Kursk area is difficult for both defense and offense as it is located on the plain, says Nava Poitenkov from the 33rd Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. We are constantly shelling the fields. Russians lose transport people here, he says. Kurakove is connected to Pokrovsk roads along which troops move and supply the front line. If the Russians take that city, they can go north to attack Pokrovsk from a new direction, says Roman Oboli, an analyst of the Ukrainian OSINT project Deep State. Another possibility is that they can attack Ukrainian troops near Ugledar from the rear. The ability of Ukraine to sustain a defense against three crucial fronts, the bridgehead in Kursk, the recent new front to the west of Kursk toward Glushovko, and attempting to stop the Russian counterattack, along with their defense in Donbas, is all in jeopardy. The recent news articles coming out from the Western mainstream media all suggest to me that this Kursk incursion was really a last-ditch attempt to gain some bargaining chips for the eventual conclusion of this war. CNN notes that the decrease in aid packages for Ukraine comes amid concerns about US military readiness being impacted as US arms manufacturers play catch-up to the huge demands created by the war against Russia. According to CNN, the shortage means the Biden administration still has $6 billion in funds available to arm Ukraine, but the Pentagon lacks the inventory it is willing to deliver. One official said to the CNN, in quotations, "It's about stockpiles. We have our shelves, what the Ukrainians are asking for, and whether we can meet those requests with what we currently have without impacting our readiness." CNN admits that Ukraine is feeling the impact of the inventory shortages as President Zelensky, during a meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group in Germany, told the US and other allies that deliveries of promised air defense systems are moving too slowly and warned of a significant shortfall in vital aid. Meanwhile, Kiev must confront the brutally realistic picture painted by the commander of the United States Air Forces in Europe and Africa, who told Voice of America media that, and I quote, "Russia's military is bigger and stronger than it was prior to invading Ukraine in February of 2022. The US Air Force General by the name of John Heckler said that Russia is going to be something that we are going to have to deal with for a long time, no matter how this thing ends. This to me is a startling admission given the constant Western narrative of weakening Russia in Ukraine. In fact, I have noted how throughout this war, the Western goal of victory has shifted from the maximalist aim of collapsing the Russian economy through economic sanctions to a more limited aim of regime change, to the Ukrainian stated goals of pushing Russia out of Ukraine and establishing 1991 borders, and finally, now relegated to a vague and minimalist aim of weakening Russia to the extent that they are unable to conduct military operations anywhere else. The fact that this US general, now admitting that even the least of these goals cannot be attained, means that this entire Ukrainian adventure has been an abject failure for the West. These realities are, in my opinion, clearly being signaled to President Zelensky in these Western media reports, the most critical of which is coming from Politico in an article that suggests that the whole Kursk incursion idea came from President Zelensky alone, in contradiction to the views of his own Ukrainian commanders. And it's not just General Zaluzny who opposed it. Emil Ishkulov, commander of Ukraine's 80th Air Assault Brigade, who was dismissed in July amid protests from high-ranking officers who called for him to be kept in his position. Local media reported that at the time of his dismissal, reason was that, and I quote from Politico, he opposed a task that didn't correspond to the brigade's strength. Apparently, Ishkulov objected to the Kursk operation, fearing his brigade could eventually be too exposed inside Russia and that the casualty toll could rise precipitously. Zaluzny, as stated earlier, worried that there was no second step to the invasion and had asked Zelensky, "Once you have the bridgehead, what happens next?" He never got a clear answer from Zelensky, and thus he always felt that it was a mere risky gamble. Politico reports that Zelensky's question remains a key one, with both Western and Ukrainian doubters worrying that Kiev's forces could get caught inside and suffer a demoralizing reversal. The argument is that the redeployment of substantial forces means that they cannot be used to hold the line in Donetsk, where Russian forces have maintained a grinding offensive and are bearing down on the town of Pokrovsk, reports the article. And as I have noted above, Russia is now securing its flanks, encircling thousands of Ukrainian troops in a well-prepared and rapidly closing salient, while preparing to attack the logistical hub of Pokrovsk from the flanks in the near future. So it seems to me that the West is finally signaling to Ukraine that this adventure may be coming to an end. The fact is, US stockpiles are now very low, and Russia, to the contrary, is increasing in strength and capacity. In Kursk, as I reported on in my last video, the Russian counterattack gained almost 6 miles in one day, and the Ukrainian response to open a new front seems rather limited and small. When taken together, I see the war coming to an end soon. Kursk was therefore a last-ditch attempt at securing a better bargaining position for the upcoming negotiations.
Nach meiner Auffassung und Bewertung ist Kursk eine außerordentlich schwierige Lage für die Ukraine. Es war ein gigantischer politischer Coup, nun auf russisches Territorium vorzurücken und damit ein Faustpfand in der Hand zu haben, sollte es dann irgendwann mal zu Verhandlungen kommen. Gleichzeitig, wenn man sich militärisch die Lage betrachtet, dann ist die Situation äußerst schwierig, weil auf einer Breite von nahezu 100 Kilometern, auf einer Tiefe weiter als 30 Kilometer, ist man natürlich anfällig. Es sei denn, man nähert diesen Einbruch, ja diesen Durchbruch. Dazu bedurfte es aber weiterer Kräfte und diese Kräfte hat man im Augenblick nicht. Insofern, ich habe das schon mal gesagt, gibt es jetzt für die Ukraine 2 Möglichkeiten. Und ich würde die erste wählen. Sofortiger Rückzug, auch wenn das so ein bisschen nach Niederlage riecht. Aber das würde Kräfte, die man an anderer Stelle dringend braucht.
If Russia is able to significantly reduce the bridgehead or remove it altogether in their counterattack, the demoralizing effect commented on by the Ukrainian commanders may come true. All in all, Ukraine faces nothing short than a devastating defeat to Russia.
И у меня иногда складывается впечатление, что те, кто руководят Украиной, как будто они вообще инопланетяне какие-то, либо иностранцы. Ну, собственно говоря, не думают просто. Нет, я серьезно говорю, вы понимаете, ну такие потери колоссальные. Что они дальше будут делать, я даже не понимаю. Нужно сейчас опять понижать призывной возраст, там, чтобы детей набирать, как в Германии фашистский Гитлер-Югенд создавать. Но это не решит проблему. Следующий шаг — это студентов призывать сейчас и так далее. Полностью обескровить страну. Повторяю еще раз, такое впечатление, что это не их народ. Но, собственно говоря, понятно, родственники членов правящей элиты в основном за границей проживают, сели на самолете, и нету их, дело с концом. Они о стране-то не очень думают.